Oh, hi there. Keep Nintendo weird, my friends. Your boy Seth here. Happy to be back. It's been a little while. Good to see you. I hope you've been doing well. Yeah, it's been a little while since the last episode of this show. If this is your first time joining us in Keep Nintendo Weird, this is a Weird Nintendo podcast about loving weird Nintendo games. I get together with a special guest who loves a weird Nintendo game, and we just kind of gush about this game that we love together. No notes. No script, no nothing. We just kind of go, and that's what the show is. And I hope you pick up what we're putting down. This time around, we're talking Attack of the Friday Monsters, as voted on by our lovely Triforce tier patrons over at patreon.com/allinpodcast. Of course, you can always suggest games to me. You can tweet at me over on Twitter at KNWPodcast or at $2hero. You can email me at knwpodcast@gmail.com. All that stuff is in the description. You could leave YouTube comments, whatever. But our Triforce tier patrons, our high tier patrons, their suggestions, their votes get put to the top of the pile, and they were able to vote this very episode into existence about Attack of the Friday Monsters, one of my very favorite 3DS games. And a very, very special episode in store for you. But before we get into it, we do need to shout out our Golden Banana and Triforce tier patrons. First of all, we've got our buddy Dan Caparello of the Retro Logic podcast, who is a alumni of KNW. I believe he's been on twice, as a matter of fact. Solo Something, good friend and treasured community member. We got John Cummins, also of the Retro Logic podcast and On Topic Retro. Matt Shy Guy City Murray, who has been on this show. The great Rob Yapel, longtime friend and supporter Rob Yapel. Third Strongest Mole, the third and final host of the Retro Logic podcast, who has also been on the show. You know what? It's time to get Sam back on the show. I think I need to reach out to Sam soon and get him back on. It's been too long. We've got Shy Guy, great treasured community member, fellow curry lover, just like me, talking about that in our Discord recently. Sean Ashton, our newest Patreon member, Sean O'Baggins, great guy. Tim A, aka NeoPrime33, aka Nintendo Dad number 4, who has also, believe it or not, been on this very podcast, and one of the great OG Nintendo dads. And then moving into our Triforce tier patrons, we've got Josh Vaughn, longtime friend and supporter of my stuff, the Globetrotting, Jet-Settin' Sparky, who is one of the patrons, I believe, that specifically requested this very episode you're about to hear. And then, as always, the fan favorite, the beloved Uncle Randy, rounding out the Triforce tier patrons. And guys, this is a special episode. Now, you're going to notice a couple of things. Past few episodes of Keep Nintendo Weird, I had sort of moved to doing a live broadcast of it. I don't know if I'm going to keep doing that or not. You guys let me know, either in the patron chat, Discord, YouTube comments, Twitter, whatever. Let me know what you think, because here's my feeling on this. And I did a trial run of this with this episode, because I knew that this episode was going to be an emotional one for me, and I'll get into why in a second. But I chose not to live broadcast this one. And as Ryan and I, my special guest this week, this time around, Ryan Woodward, as we were recording, and we weren't doing it live, I realized that I think that not doing a show like this live has a certain power to it. Like, there's a certain realness or rawness that you can get, even if the cameras are on, even if it's still being, obviously recorded and blah, blah, blah. There's something about your passion that can be a little bit more free, a little bit more open, a little bit more real when it isn't being live broadcasted. I think it's just a psychological thing. I don't know. So for this particular show, I'm thinking about stepping away from the live broadcast. I'm still going to do it on video. In fact, our patrons get at least 24 hours of early access to this show, and that's at all tiers, even for the $1 tier. So if you think this show is worth $1 to listen to early, then I definitely recommend heading over to the Patreon. But yeah, that's kind of what I'm feeling right now. I think I might move away from the live broadcast. So this one was not broadcasted live. Of course, we do streams all the time on twitch.tv/allinpodcast, including podcast recordings of our main show, All In, a Nintendo podcast. So, like, there are still live podcasts happening, but for this one, I actually think that live broadcasts might be a little detrimental to the experience of it. I don't know. Let me know what you think. This show is my baby. It's just a big old experiment. I don't have to be married to anything. Let me know what you think. But the reason I chose not to live broadcast this one in particular is because this one is kind of in the memory of my friend, the late Fahmi, who sadly passed away earlier this year. One of the last conversations that I had with Fahmi was about his forthcoming appearance on this show. He and I were planning on having him on here. One of our last DMs was about him coming on the show to talk about Attack of the Friday Monsters, a game that he and I loved very, very, very deeply. And after he passed away, it was very, very sudden, his passing. And after he passed away, I didn't really know how I should proceed with it. I knew I still wanted to cover this game because fans of this show will know that I have been trying to focus on 3DS and Wii U eShop games because we're about to lose them. Next March, we'll not be able to buy these anymore, not be able to play them without, emulation or whatever. So I wanted to cover these games while you guys could still easily access them. So I knew that this was one that I wanted to cover, and even after Fahmi's passing, I knew that he would want me to cover it anyway. I just didn't know how I would feel comfortable doing it without him. Because, guys, like, the games that are chosen for this show are great, and it's always awesome to connect with fans of these games and everything, but this show, for me, is all about the people. Like, the guests that come on and chat about these games with me, being able to share in the passion and connect with these people in our shared love and passion for these games is what this show is all about for me. Creatively, emotionally, like, that is what it is for me. And I just didn't know if there was anybody else who could be there on that level with me about this game than Fahmi. And so once Fahmi's gone, what do? So enter Ryan Woodward, who earlier this year, Fahmi and I actually, in the conversation that led to him and I talking about doing this episode together, we were tweeting, just kind of openly tweeting at each other about Attack of the Friday Monsters, and Ryan had entered into the conversation. Ryan made a game called Button City, which is very inspired by Attack of the Friday Monsters. And he had reached out and he had sent me a DM and he's like, hey, like, I saw you talking with Fahmi. I also love Attack of the Friday Monsters and I just want to let you know about my game. And I ended up playing Button City after that and I really, really enjoyed it. And so when I got to thinking about, this game came up with our patrons voted it. And I said, okay, like, I'm going to do it, but I don't know who I can reach out. I don't know who can fill Fahmi's shoes. And that's when Ryan came to mind. I thought, what a beautiful way to sort of honor Fahmi's memory, to still do this episode about Attack of the Friday Monsters the way Fahmi would want to do it, and to connect with, like, a new friend over it, a mutual friend, somebody who loves Fahmi like I do, and somebody who loves this game like I do. So that was Ryan, and it's a great conversation about a really special game. I am eternally grateful to Ryan for carving out the time to come and chat and do it in Fahmi's memory with me. And it's really, really special. And I think Fahmi would have enjoyed it. So with all that being said, I'm not going to rattle on any longer. Great conversation about Attack the Friday Monsters. We're going to welcome Ryan to the show right here, right now. And as always, we are going to keep Nintendo weird. All right, everybody. I am so happy to be sitting here with Ryan from Subliminal, the folks behind Button City, and here for a very special episode of Keep Nintendo Weird. Thank you so much for doing this, Ryan. Good to see you.
Hey, Seth. Thanks. Yeah, definitely. Thanks for having me on. I'm super excited to talk about Attack of the Friday Monsters and yeah, share that,
Yeah, yeah. So this one is a special episode, and I've kind of talked about this publicly, but I just wanted to say it here in the front because this episode is in memory of our mutual friend Fahmi, who sadly passed away earlier this year, and it was one of those things where, one of the last conversations I had with Fahmi before he passed away was about this game. And he was planning on coming on to talk about this game with me for this episode. And I had sat on it for a while because after his passing, I was like, I don't know what to do. Like, I want to cover this game. I want to talk about this game, but I don't want to do it without Fahmi,
Yeah.
And so you came to mind because when I was talking with Fahmi, ironically enough, I think about this game on Twitter. And you had reached out and you were like, hey, if you like this game, you might like my game Button City. I saw you talking with Fahmi and everything, and I checked it out, and I loved Button City. And I think that I think you're the perfect person to do this episode with. So I really appreciate it. You taking the time out and doing this episode in the memory of a mutual friend. I just think it's really beautiful. So thank you again.
Yeah, and thank you for having me. Fahmi was obviously a force, especially within, the kind of games that, like we're looking at, things like Coffee Talk and everything, just very cozy, intimate spaces. And, their upcoming game, which he didn't get to finish out, looks absolutely amazing as well. Just very intimate, very close, very slice of life. And, I feel very honored and humbled, that you reached out to me to, talk about this amazing game as well. And, I just want to, also echo in memory for Fahmi as well. So, thank you for having me here.
Yeah, it's great to do this for the love of the game and for the love of Fahmi. Really, really special. I've been thinking about him a lot this week because Coffee Talk just came to Game Pass, and so I've had a lot of Xbox friends who are kind of discovering Coffee Talk, and it's like, oh hey, it's like one of the best games ever made. So so it's I've been thinking about him a lot lately, and so it's really special to get to do this with you. But before we get into it, I do want to give you an opportunity to just sort of talk about yourself, introduce yourself and what you do, and talk about Button City for a bit, because I think people that are fans of this kind of game are going to really get a kick out of Button City. It is definitely that kind of slice of life, very human, very real, despite the fact that it's, features animal characters, very human story and very real story. So, just talk about Button City for a second, if you would.
Sure. So as a quick thing, I'm Ryan. I co-founded a indie game studio with my wife, Shandine, called Subliminal Gaming. And Button City was our first big game that came out for PS5, Xbox Series XS, Nintendo Switch, PC, Mac on Steam, and itch. And we recently just celebrated its 1 year anniversary. And we released a free art book with it that, does some behind the scenes on it and everything, and shows a lot of really great art pieces from there as well, from Shandine and Val, our other artist. Val was the one who put together the art books. I just want to shout her out as well.
Yeah.
And so Button City is this cute slice of life game, narrative adventure game, where you play as this cute fox who explores these dioramas in the sky. And you're new to town, and you discover an arcade called Button City and make a ton of new friends there. You join up on a team called the Fluff Squad, and you're trying to play this game called GoboBots. And it's a lot of people consider it to be like a MOBA light. We weren't really looking at MOBAs, but
right.
If it works, it works. But it's this kind of 4v4, kind of robot battling thing, and you're harvesting berries and stuff. So it's like this game about, like this arcade that's being threatened of being shut down by a greedy fat cat, and you're on a kid adventure to try to save it and, make new friends, learn the story of people around town, challenge to arcade games, very much, like reinstilling like that slice of life, and I don't know, just having a fun kid adventure. We started this back out in like 2016.
Wow.
It's kind of funny. Like, it started out as like a little like art thing, just that my wife was doing, Shondine. And it turned into a full game. Like, it just kind of evolved from like, oh, we have this house, we have this fox, and we solved for the premise rather than like coming up with like a core gameplay loop like you would normally do with like a first person shooter or like any other genre, whatever. So it was a really cool experience to go through. And if this sounds great to you, like, we love arcade culture, we celebrate it. You might love Button City as well. If it sounds for you, it's definitely for you.
Definitely. I love the phrase you used a couple of times there, kid adventure. Yeah. I love that. Because that's what like these sorts of games are. And this, Kaz Ayabe games, like, it is all through the lens of childhood. And I think that is something that Button City captures well. And there are a few, games that kind of tap into this, but you are in rarefied air. There aren't that many games that are kind of about just being a kid, and I love that. And I love that about these games. I love that about Attack of the Friday Monsters. There is something very special. We all want to reclaim our childhood, right? We yes. all want to go back to those good old days before the world was terrible, or at least before it seemed terrible. And getting an experience like that is very special and rare. So,
yeah, what's funny is like, obviously Attack of the Friday Monsters was like an inspiration. I was really excited once it was announced like so many years ago. And then when we were making Button City, that was a touchstone. But other ones like were things like Yakuza or Majora's Mask or Shenmue, even though I haven't played Shenmue. Everybody's like, oh, this is like child's Shenmue. I'm like, cool. So
I'll take it. Good.
Yeah. So there's like some, at least, core experiences, but not quite so fine pointed like Kaz Ayabe's work, and I think that really makes games like Attack of the Friday Monsters and the new Shin-Chan game that just came out even more special because I don't know, it's just very I'm really at a loss of words, but it's like so cool just to have like this medium of interactivity and expression be able to have this form of play where it's not necessarily challenge based. I don't know how to say it beyond like it's like very much about the experience rather than what we could see as like games typically from one lens being like, an overcoming of challenge or something like that. These are very much like, I'm going through this just to go through it.
Yeah, it's not about, let me take down the boss, let me get the high score. It's not about that. It's about, the experience of living it. It is a slice of life. That is what games like this are about. And I think that, and I can understand, and I say this all the time about Kaz Ayabe's games, especially. I was just talking about the Shin-Chan game on a recent episode of All In. Like, these games are not for everybody, and I get it. Like, I understand games like this are not for everybody, but there are people, like Fahmi would say, sad 35-year-olds, who want to go back and rediscover this stuff and kind of tap into the kid adventure, the whimsical sort of lens that we put over everything when we were kids, the way that we viewed the world when we were kids. And I think that's really, really special. To pivot into this one, and I definitely want to get your thoughts on Shin-Chan while I have you here, maybe at the end, but to pivot into Attack of the Friday Monsters. Now, this is, and another reason I'm wanting to cover this now, Folks who are fans of this show will know that I've been really focusing on 3DS and Wii U games, as the eShops are sadly closing at the beginning of next year. So I'm trying to kind of, present these games to you while you still have the chance to buy them and play them, before we're going to have to turn to things like emulation and whatever. And Attack of the Friday Monsters is one such game. It is a 3DS eShop digital exclusive, part of the Guild series, Guild 02 specifically. I've covered many of the Guild games already. Games like Crimson Shroud come to mind. And this is another one. And Kaz Ayabe is just this special game designer that makes very unique games. I guess probably most known for, I'm sorry if I mispronounce this, Boku no Natsu Yasumi? Is that how you pronounce it?
Based on my 753-day streak on Duolingo, maybe.
I'll take a maybe.
Sure.
Take a maybe. It's my summer vacation, basically.
Yeah.
Series in Japan. He's probably most known for that, and his studio Millennium Kitchen, who made this game, and they're kid adventures. These are kid adventures.
Definitely. I feel like the Guild series of games made me have a deep appreciation for the creators behind them. They had Suda 51, they had I don't remember all the creators on there, but it was just hey, we're doing effectively the short film equivalent, festival of games, and seeing pieces that you probably wouldn't necessarily see from more established developers, almost in an indie game with a budget, make these small vignette games or smaller experiences was really, really cool. You said Crimson Shroud, that's the Dungeons and Dragons one, with the dice and everything. I remember that one and Attack of the Friday Monsters being the two big ones for me. I'm these feel very fresh. These feel like they were meant to be within this kind of form. And from that, Attack of the Friday Monsters just became one of those experiences where it's oh, this is going to stay with me almost immediately. I saw the trailer. I'm oh, they're talking about kaiju and heroes from the 1960s, 1970s Japan, and living through this kind of very unique time where there was high development in Japan, and a youth culture coming about with these kaiju and everything. And it was very much set in this piece that you really don't see anywhere outside of oh, maybe if you watch tokusatsu, or something, but not at least the celebration of that within games. And it was just really exciting to see something at least to me was so fresh, especially from this collaboration, oh, we get to have this. And I was worried that it wouldn't come to America, because this was during the time of Project Rainfall and Xenoblade Chronicles 1 barely got out here eventually.
Right.
I'm
isn't that crazy?
Yeah. And I'm oh, is this gonna come out here? I really want to play these games. I guess I'll have to learn Japanese, and I still want to learn Japanese even more, but I'm really happy that it came out, should we describe the game a little bit? I feel we're kind of talking a little bit around it beforehand.
I totally get what you're saying, though. I can relate to that, especially, I don't know if this is the case for you. This was my first Kaz Ayabe game that I had played. I had been familiar with them, and I had always wanted to play the My Summer Vacation games. So this is the first one I ever got to actually play, and there was nothing like it. So yeah. I guess to describe the game, Attack of the Friday Monsters, again, this is a 3DS game, and it is, you play as a boy named, I think his name is Sota, a 10-year-old boy, I think, I believe they say that in the game's theme song, which is amazing. The opening credits theme. And yeah, he's in this. So the subtitle for this game is actually A Tokyo Tale, which is interesting because it takes place in a prefecture. I think it's called Fujinohana prefecture, kind of in Tokyo. And it's very like on the outskirts. It's this kind of sleepy little Japanese prefecture, very small. Your parents run the local laundromat. You know, you just moved there. You're the new kid. And I guess the big sort of like crux and where the title comes from is every Friday night. I think the game takes place in like the early, like 1971, I think is the year. And every Friday night, these monsters, you know, appear and they fight off like this, you know, Super Sentai, you know, sort of character for, like you said, a tokusatsu show. And it all feels very like mystical and whimsical, and that's sort of the basic setup, I suppose.
Yeah, what's interesting about it, like, it's almost like a suburb or like you know, like just an outer skirts area of Tokyo that would eventually like be morphed into the Tokyo metropolitan area. But it's like, oh, this was like beforehand, before it became like all cityfied effectively.
Right.
But you know, like what's interesting about the area is like they have a TV station there. You know, they have you know, like a rail line that goes through with this one bar that just doesn't like open up. And you see like throughout the game, like just trains kind of like going in and out in the background, and like in the distance you see like factories, you know, and their smokestacks going like just kind of doing their way to progress to the future that, you know, that we're a part of now. And I don't know, it's just kind of interesting seeing like what these kids would do for fun, you know, and like kind of like the questions that they would have about like these monsters and stuff and their relationship to it as well, because the TV station seems to be filming like a, you know, giant monster show as well. Like, so are these monsters real or not? There's a card game that's pretty core to the game as well. All of the cards that you get are, you know, monster based, you know, and it looks like, you know, like what the monster could be from, or like one of them could be from what they're doing. And it's like based on this like rock, paper, scissors setup.
Yes.
And you know, like that's very core, where you're also doing like, if you win or you lose, you like do this like almost magic spell, and like it's very like it's such a great game in terms of like how they kind of weave like this kind of love of these monsters, and then almost like the fear of them as well. Like, that they have like, oh, the monster's coming, you got to watch out. Or you see like these giant footsteps like throughout the landscape as well. And they're like, are these real? This looks dug up. And it's like, you wouldn't want to get smashed by that too. I don't know. It's just, it's really cool. And it's set up in kind of like a classic Resident Evil 1, Resident Evil 2 kind of movement setup, where you're going from screen to screen. In fact, they still do this in Shin-Chan, where you could press the auto run button and then you have tank controls. And I think that's kind of great, in not the fact that I think it's a great control scheme, but that they just keep it regardless.
They still do it. Yeah, in 2022, we're still doing it.
Yeah. I don't know. It's just, it's a wonderful, like, just piece. And it, like, even after playing through all of it and like knowing the ending, it's still like, oh, are these monsters real or not? Are they, you know, like, I'm happy that even though it like can't give an answer, it does also feel like, oh, this can be kind of like an imagination type of thing, like throughout the entire thing, and it's great.
Yeah, I love that you brought that up, because that was something that has always struck me about the game, is you get this sense, because, you know, the adults in this kind of little, you know, Fujinohana prefecture, like, you get to know these characters really well. That's a really, I think, core component of all of these games, is you have kind of a small core group of characters that you just get to know super, super well.
Yeah.
And you get to know like the doofy like police officer that sits by the train station, and you get to know the baker, and and the barber shop, and the weird like old guy that a lot of
Oh,
these tropes come back in Shin-Chan, which is kind of funny. But all of that stuff, like I think about how it's almost like you get this vibe of like when you were a kid and your parents would kind of just go along with you, like with
yeah.
the stuff you were saying. Like you would be like, oh yeah, like, the monsters are coming out. Be careful. Don't stay out too late. The monsters will get you, like that sort of thing. And you sort of do get this sense as you unravel the sort of mysteries of the game of like you and your friends kind of piecing this together of like there's something going on, but it's almost like the adults are not wanting to ruin the mystery for the
Right.
kids. Like, I really appreciate that about this game. I really appreciate that the game never, even though you get a ton of evidence that this is all, fake or whatever, this is all for a show. I mean, you literally at a certain point go to a film set, right?
Yeah.
But there's definitely like an air of whimsical to it. There's an air of like, we're never going to give you a 100% definitive yes or no.
Yeah.
And I love that.
Like,
keeping it open.
What I kind of love about the game as well, like once you get towards like the back third of it, there's also a sense of scale. Like, what I find funny about like a lot of, at least like maybe you see it a little bit more in modern stuff, but like one of the things that I always feel like with a lot of like larger than life movies, and like you have a large hero monster, like whatever, you don't really get a sense of scale. And like I like when I was playing, like it always has kind of like, depending where you are, you see the monster in the background or the hero in the background, and it feels big. Like it feels like really, really large. I guess in like games, the problem is like we have cameras that try to give you a good shot, so you have like what's it called, just really good combat or feel and stuff like that. But you don't necessarily always feel small appropriately. Like with third person cameras and stuff, you have to make it so you have good composition for control. But with this one, since it is fixed camera and everything, like you feel like a kid in a space, and the monsters are really big. And I was really appreciative that they were able to like put that sense of scale in there, and they made like small areas feel real, at least to me. And then like when you are out like near footsteps or something, they do feel big. It reminds me of like when I went to Japan and saw the life-size Gundam. If you see pictures of it, like it's like, oh yeah, that seems big. But like once you're there, you're like, I'm like, if I laid down, I'm like half of its foot, like it's
right.
big. Yeah, it's huge. And I got some of that from Attack of the Friday Monsters. And maybe some of that was like some of the 3D effects. I didn't turn it on a ton this time, but I wanted to like, get back into there. But even like when it was totally off, like I felt like the sense of scale was nice. I don't know. That's like a weird detail to maybe pick up on, but it was like just one of those things that I appreciated, where it did kind of like bring me into the game a bit more.
Yeah, I was definitely I was curious how much of that comes from, as a game designer and somebody who has, made a game kind of in this style a little bit. Is it interesting to you to revisit this game like post Button City? Like to revisit this after you've also kind of bumped up against some of the challenges of making a game like this?
Yeah, it's pretty interesting in terms of like Button City, like we thought of it from kind of like two ways. One was like, oh, how do we make like this central premise and go through that and everything? And then how do we create the surrounding world in terms of like side quests and stuff like that? And that was like the main thing on my mind, and like how you view the world, and how to get to these I'm like going in so many directions all at once. But
No.
like, how do you like connect to this world when you are looking at it from like an outside perspective? Because it was pretty much always looking in from the outside for us. So when coming to trying to get like these connections either through story or through shot composition, things like that, it's interesting seeing how like we solved for that and then like how
Right.
this game solves for that. From a mechanics point of view, I mean, these are it's like an exploration game where you're going up and just slamming A. What's funny
Basically.
about that is that like I remember playing Dragon Quest 1 on my phone when I was really sick, and like in that game, like when you're in towns, you're just effectively doing the same thing as you would be doing in either Button City or in Attack of the Friday Monsters, where it's just like you are doing this like exploration and like kind of flipping over every rock and like trying to find things. And I always thought it was hard to like pitch that, but it's like a weird, fun core loop that I enjoy, where you're like discovering like, oh, I found an item or I found some more story. So like finding that that's like a viable loop was really interesting while making Button City. And then what a core thing with a lot of these games, including Attack of the Friday Monsters, To the Moon, Button City, is there's usually like a core conceit. Like in Attack of the Friday Monsters, it's the card game.
Right.
And then for Button City, we have like the arcade games, and we have a few of them, but there was only one that you had to play. And then in To the Moon, there was like these kind of like locks or something like that. I don't fully remember. I haven't played it in a long time, but all of them have kind of like, here's the quote unquote gameplay, even though, like that's not the core experience, honestly. It's kind of like there to put in some spice or put some conceit.
Right.
And I'm really glad with Attack of the Friday Monsters that they did make it like, oh, these kaiju like cards that just felt like, oh, there's a TV station. These are promotional items to get children excited for it. So it felt very much like of the space. And when we were making GobaBots, like within Button City, like we took a lot of like that idea, like how can we like get like a core conceit that feels part of the world and not just like, oh, throw it in there to spice things up or like whatever. So
Yeah.
going back to Attack of the Friday Monsters, like it was just like, this feels like a well geared like watch or something, like just something like that fits together extremely well.
Yeah, narratively contextualized also, like you were saying. I think that's pretty important component to what you did with Button City and with Attack of the Friday Monsters. Yeah, you've got these monster cards, and that is sort of the main, I guess, gameplay. I don't want to say gimmick, but that's the framework, I guess, for gameplay. Because otherwise, it is just walking around through this little prefecture and doing, little errands, doing little tasks. It's very like, one thing that is interesting about Kaz Ayabe's games is he adapts this like non-linear structure to them where you'll get into, and this is true of Attack of the Friday Monsters and of Shin-Chan, you'll get in there and there'll just be like, 25 chapters, right? But they're all ongoing like at the same time, and it's not like you're just going chapter 1 to 2 to 3 to 4. You might complete chapter 16 just randomly or whatever. And I think that's a really interesting structure, and some of the chapters are just as simple as I took the lady at the bakery her laundry, and I met this character and I learned more about Frank, the weird old guy in the prefecture or whatever, and so I like that there is that little bit of structure to push you along. And something that I also think that Attack of the Friday Monsters does really well, that I actually am kind of missing in Shin-Chan, now that I'm playing Shin-Chan and I replayed Attack of the Friday Monsters gearing up for this, I really liked how they took advantage of the bottom screen and had that map there. and had that all, like, I feel like I'm kind of missing that in Shin-Chan a little bit. And I'm like, this is a really, like, not only is it, this very special focused experience that it is, but it actually makes good functional use of the hard. Like, I think that a game like this benefits more from just slapping a map on the bottom screen than most
Right.
genres do, you know? So I really like that about this game too. It's smartly designed.
Yeah, going back to the quest structure, yeah. Once you beat the game, like it does something kind of interesting. It has like a post credits thing,
Hmm.
which we also do, but we don't utilize this system. But what they do is they have like these conversations that you hold on to. So like you'll
Right.
talk to somebody, and then it'll be like, oh, like we all have to do the same pose or something like that. I think that's like one of the first ones you get. And then you start like talking to everybody about like, let's all do the same pose or something like when you beat
Hmm.
or whatever. Um, but then eventually like you'll grab onto another conversation from that. And then you start talking to like a bunch of people from there. And I thought it was just kind of like interesting how to, I guess, like use conversation as an item almost.
Right. Right.
Yeah, I don't know how to like explain it beyond that. But you would have like it would just unlock additional like chapter things and like help finish things out. But it was just an interesting way to design a convert or a quest, especially for like at that point in the game.
Hmm.
I haven't really
Yeah.
seen it anywhere else, honestly.
Yeah, it's interesting, and there, some of the things that we're describing. Like, I think if a lot of modern designers would hear it and be like, why is that okay? Like, why
Yeah.
that's not the traditional, way that you would approach these problems in modern game design. But when you frame it alongside all of the things that this game is trying to say and all of the things that this game is trying to make you feel, one of the first things that happens in this game is you're running like a very simple errand, and the kind of narrator of this game, this S-chan, I
Yeah.
think is her localized name anyway, um will like kind of poke you and be like, oh, like you've forgotten something, like this, like you were
Yeah.
supposed to be doing this, you know and that feels very true. Like, that feels very like, when you're a kid and your parents send you out on an errand or whatever, and it's like, oh crap, like I was supposed to do this also. um so even that, like, even playing with that non-linear sort of structure, I mean, the game has linearity to it, but playing with that non-linear quest structure, even that manages to feed into the feeling of being a kid, and I think that's super interesting.
What's interesting to me is that like it's laid out content non-linear in that you could get to a lot of it like almost out of order, but you'll
Hmm.
get to it eventually. Like you're effectively like just consuming the content, but like there's this like idea of like at least like within a lot of Western RPGs, like you need multiple endings or you need like moral system or like characters react to you in some way or like very like custom to the player's experience, whereas like
Hmm.
a lot of like the inspirations like say for Button City and that we grabbed from with like a lot of these types of games like from Yakuza, Attack of the Friday Monsters, Majora's Mask, was less about like crafting it to be your own, but like being an agent within this space and like understand like getting that the stories that they get from just exploring it rather than like crafting your own story. um and I'm probably wrong in this, but I heard somewhere, I'm probably wrong, I just want to, but whatever. But like the idea of like role playing, like you're playing a role rather than like enacting, like, oh, my barbarian would say things like this. No, you're just like
Hmm.
rolling as this player. When talking about like Japanese role playing games, like I've heard it explained as that, like through Twitter, where it's less about the decision making, but you're experiencing the world as this role. Hence, maybe more the linearity. I just heard it like in the ether. I'm like, oh, that's like kind of the games that we're making though. And you're kind of
Right.
embodying the role, not necessarily enacting like what you think the character would do, but you're just like kind of guiding them through the process effectively. And I thought that was just really interesting just to, like go back through it and really like go through this story and see like, okay, yeah, this character is just like going through these things, and it's just kind of fun to effectively go through a story,
Yeah.
interactive book effectively, but
And
jump
yeah,
around and do that.
and doesn't that sound, I mean, that sounds like such a simple idea, but
Yeah.
like that to me is more of, people talk about cinematic experiences, and I think a lot of people would describe, a Skyrim or a Mass Effect or whatever as a cinematic experience, and they certainly are. But for me, something like this, where, yeah, like I am this 10-year-old boy in 1971 in this little Japanese prefecture of Tokyo, like that is a cinematic experience to me on the measure of something that, this game reminds me a lot of My Neighbor Totoro.
Oh yeah.
Like a lot of it. Just the worldview and this sort of like, there's almost like a magic to childhood that I feel like these games kind of embody, this sort of, almost notion of there's this whole world that you can only see when you're a kid, and there's this whole perspective that you only get when you're a kid, and, the adults kind of understand that bubble will one day burst, so they don't want to poke it too hard. I feel like these games kind of celebrate that, and I think that's really special. Something that we haven't talked about yet. We mentioned the monster game and the monster cards. One complaint that I see lodged against this game a lot, maybe the most egregious complaint or the most popular complaint maybe against this game, is the glims that are just everywhere. I personally really like them. Yeah. I don't know. I don't really know. Like the narrative conceit is, these monsters come every Friday and like they leave these fragments of themselves behind or whatever, and you collect 7 of them and now you've got your monster card. But as you mentioned earlier, it's sort of like, well, these are probably promotional materials that are left from people who work for the television company or whatever. And to me, and some of them are like annoyingly hidden, sure, but to me, I really enjoyed just like kind of going through, you see that little glint, you go and pick it up, it makes that little noise, and then you have like a progress towards your card. I love it.
Yeah, it's interesting because like one of the things that we added in Button City was like this like trash pickup thing, whatever. It's just
right.
Like, oh, click the trash, you pick it up. Once you get like 50, I think I don't remember what the reward was. I think it was like another GoBot or something. But, people seem to like really liking searching for these little trinkets, and, going back and playing Attack the Friday Monsters, I was like, oh, this kind of like breaks up like exploration movement. This kind of like moves around and like gives me a reason to like search the corners a bit more instead of like beelining it constantly. So, like it can be annoying, like if you're like, oh, I need one more, just for this card. But, it's also like, well, it gives me a reason to like go through like each part a bit more. Not my favorite system, but I think the game would be worse without it for
I agree.
Real. Yeah. What's interesting to me is like, is it promotional material? Maybe, but it's also like maybe this like idea of like, because it's like, can the adults see it? I don't know. Like
right.
Maybe this is like something imagined, and it's like, oh, the game is very like kind of funny in like how it presents some things. I don't know. If I saw like just some like random like glowing thing, I'd probably talk about it as an adult and be like, what are all these glowing things like throughout the city now,
Right. Yeah. Well, my read on it was like, these people go out and they put out these little cards or whatever, and an adult might pass it and be like, well, that's just like a piece of trash or whatever. But since we aren't an adult, since we're a kid, it's glistening, it's like shiny, and we want to pick it up and we want to collect it. That was kind of my read on it, and and that may not be what they were going for. I'm not sure, but it's something to, you know, because this game has like these screens that are all, you know, static. You're moving through them. Very, you know, beautiful art in all of this games. Beautiful,
I
beautiful
was
art.
really surprised going back to it. Like,
Oh,
I was like, I see like obviously the pixels on the 3DS, but like, wow, this is like really, really nice art.
holds
Like,
up. Yeah.
oh wow,
Yeah, holds up. And it came
background's
out like almost
amazing,
10 years ago.
right?
Like, it's nuts. And the backgrounds are gorgeous. Like, and still gorgeous. And yeah, you know, the character animations and things, you know, look like a 3DS game, but your 3D characters moving in these spaces, and, you know, kind of in like you mentioned the Resident Evil games earlier, which I think is a really astute observation. It kind of reminds me of like PS1 Final Fantasy, where you're like,
Yeah.
you know, walking up against JPEG backgrounds, you know, and it doesn't look super nice all the time, but in this one, like, there's just, it feels very, very natural. The art is just stunning, and I like that it gives you a reason to spend more time in those spaces and look at those spaces a little bit more closely than you would if they weren't there. Like, if they weren't there, you would just zoom through the screen, get to the next spot. But because they're there, it's like, oh, like, I actually have to look at this swing set a little bit more closely because there's a little, you know, glim under there. So I like that a lot about it.
Something that I liked about it in terms of like spacing as well, like when you would cut from one camera to another,
Mm-hmm.
um, again, like once it got to the monsters, like you would see them from like different angles and it would have like this nice continuity to it. I don't know why. I know it's like a cheap, you know, like a thing to do, but I was like, this just feels nice.
Yeah,
That I don't get to experience quite as often anymore in games. Like it did remind me of playing games like Legend of Dragoon or like PS
totally.
other. I didn't play Final Fantasy VII when I was like a kid with a PS1. I got Legend of Dragoon instead. But you know, like I was just, it did remind me of like that era of gaming and how while we have like amazing graphics now and like full 3D like real-time rendering, shadows, like all these things, like absolutely beautiful, it it did bring me back to like, oh, this was pretty cool as well, like in terms of just like how you set up a space and experience that I think more people should maybe explore again, because I think there can be some cool ways to do it,
Yeah,
especially like making a space feel a bit more intimate. um,
totally.
yeah, I think that's something that I think it makes a very strong case for this type of movement camera system. It just
Yeah.
makes things extremely intimate.
What a cool, and I love what you said earlier about how important the perspective of it is, how important the framing of each screen is, how it can make you feel small, how it can make you feel up close if it wants to, how it can show you what it needs to, and at the same time, like, if there is a moving element, it can make that stand out too. When the monsters and the like Ultraman sort of figure are fighting, like, you have that moving element against the static, and that makes it look like it just stands out, you know, all the more. Which
By the way,
I
the
think is
mocap
cool.
work on that fight is so
Yeah,
great. I was like sitting there, I'm like, this is amazing.
yeah,
It was so
really
good.
good. Yeah, you know, I was thinking about while I was watching that play out again in that moment, it reminded me of how I did an episode on my favorite DS game is Ghost Trick Phantom Detective,
Oh, cool.
and it reminds me of the way they handled that in that game. Like, the animation, just something fluid about it. I don't know. Like, it just looks really good, and just the perspective of it, kind of seeing them in the distance, and they look huge, and yeah, it's rad. The monster card, and this is something that I thought was interesting too. So many things in this game carry into Shinchan, including this sort of like monster card battle thing, which is glorified rock paper scissors,
Yeah.
really. But it feels like a kid's game. Like, it feels like something you would do with kids. Very, very simple rules. At the end of it, somebody gets to be your servant. You know,
Yeah.
that you cast a magic spell on them, make them fall down, and embarrass them. It feels very, very childlike, and very like rudimentary, but you know, it's a fun little thing to do in both this and Shin-Chan. I thought that was so funny that carried over very, very closely into Shin-Chan.
Yeah, for those who don't know, like the way it works is you get these cards that have rock, paper, scissors icons on them, and they have a few others where it's like a special rule, like, oh, this one anything but, you know, scissors type of deal, or like whatever, and you have to place down 5 cards face down, and the other opponent does too, and then it'll say hint, and it will say which ones are winning, or, you know, draw or whatever. It'll say like 2 of them, and you have to flip 2 cards, and then the opponent also does. So they might go first if it's like if you're losing, to flip cards. But then like it kind of resolves itself and all the cards are flipped over, and it's like, oh, this one's a win, this one's a draw, this one's a lose, win, lose, and then whoever has the most wins. And towards the end of the game, S-Chan, she's hanging out in the laundromat, like your family's laundromat. She is so hard to beat. Oh my gosh. I spent like a half an hour like trying to beat her, and I was like, I can't do this. So I didn't get the last story chapter because I just couldn't beat her.
She's the final boss.
Yeah. But I was like, oh, this is kind of a cool system. Like, I don't know how you could play this without a third party involved. So it's
Right.
like a analog game that could almost only be done with a video game. And I think that's
right.
kind of cool, honestly.
That's an interesting point. Yeah.
Yeah. Like, you would need a third person that you would trust, and like they would have to like look at the cards without like revealing them, you know, somehow to do it more analog. But like the way that they're able to kind of like speed that up and like do it within a game setting, but still make it feel like it can be, you know, like analog. Just
wow.
Master class on that. It's so cool.
Yeah. That is super cool. You're totally right. I'd never thought about that. Yeah, that's really cool. That makes me like it even more, honestly. And it's funny because, again, I think a lot of people look at that and they're like, oh, this is kind of boring, kind of dumb, kind of simple. But at the same time, like, you're a 10-year-old kid, you know, and you're just playing, you know, this rock, paper, scissors card game with your little monster cards. By the way, I think my favorite, I'm curious what your favorite monster card is. I think I have to go with I think it's called Mesozoic Mosquito. I forget the character's name, but it's just this mosquito alien monster. And yeah, that's a favorite for me.
I don't remember the names right now, because like the way I could at least like say my strategy on it. Like the way that I would do it is like I would almost do a palindromic like sequence of cards. So I would do like paper, scissors, rock, scissors, paper.
Right.
I don't remember the monsters' names. Like one of the ones I remember is the like alien spaceship one, the like, you know, prototypical UFO with a green alien in there. And then they had just some like straight up kaiju looking ones. And I remember it just like looking really, really cool and enjoying that. But I'm really bad with names in this in this context. But like coming at the game with like that strategy and then like trying to modify it with like the knot cards was maybe not the best strategy, but it was something that I was like, well, this is kind of like an interesting way to like go at it. And it made me at least like think of it a little bit, because like I was like, how is it so hard? It feels like this would be like all luck almost. And maybe the AI is cheating a little bit, but like I actually had to like think out the sequence. Like, okay, so if they are winning here and losing here, that means that they have like paper on this one and rock on this one, and they're going to switch that out based off of like my switching. So I have to, it was like getting to, is it called Yomi? The fighting game positional thing, and like the actual rock, paper, scissors thing. So it was like microdosing that.
Totally.
Yeah.
Totally. Yeah.
Which was interesting.
That's funny. And I mean, how cool that you could even, you know, have an experience like that where it's like, where you can even, you know, think about strategy in this very, very simplistic, you know, experience that is almost like superfluous to the experience of the game. But then again, like when you beat somebody and you get to cast your own magic spell and everything, and you get to make them fall down, be your servant or whatever, like that's again, just everything feeds into this experience of being a kid and making you feel like a piece of that world and like connected to those characters. And even the monster card, even the most core, gameplay in the traditional sense of this game even makes you feel like that. And I found it interesting. I definitely want to ask you about your thoughts on Shin-Chan so far. I haven't finished it yet, but they sort of carry this over into Shin-Chan a little bit, and it's even more simplistic
Yeah.
in Shin-Chan than it is here. There's like it's even more straightforward, but weirdly it's more like bombastic visually. Like there's a lot going on visually, but mechanically it's very, very simple. So I found that funny.
Yeah, I should say two things one thing before Shin-Chan. Like, one, I think it's hilarious, by the way. You could set up your spells in the game. So you can, and they're like automatopoeia like type of words, like gudung gudung,
Right.
like things like that, and like fall down, dance around, things like that. And then you ended out with yelling arise because they fall down afterwards and everything. And I think that's kind of cool that you could unlock like spell words. I don't know if it does anything different outside of like what your character says, but it's like just this like small little customization that just makes it flavor. Like like just another little flavor, and it's nice. With Shin-Chan, like I've maybe played like 30 minutes so far, so I'm not like super far in. Like once you get past like the first major like chapter, because like the first chapter you literally can't do anything except like read through, and it's fine. It looks beautiful. It feels like at least what I thought a Shin-Chan episode was. I don't know if I ever watched it. Like I've seen it from afar being like, oh yeah, that kid.
I know that
but
kid.
Yeah, but getting to the point where I was able to like do the butt wiggle, like that's like kind of where I'm at. Like I'm really excited for it, and it's really great to hear that they brought some of that stuff over. What I'm excited about is to find out more about like the camera and like how they're going to be incorporating that into the game. So I'm like, yeah, I unfortunately I've been like really busy, but like this is like
sure.
It's just really cool to like see kind of like the evolution of like these kind of systems and vibes going forward. Especially in like, it looks like an episode. Like I don't know how they made these 3D models, but like maybe I should watch another Guilty Gear like behind the scenes like like whatever, but like they do the silhouettes and shapes so well, because like the Shin-Chan characters are not typical anime like in any way whatsoever.
They're very crudely drawn, and it's very and Crown Shin-Chan's been around for decades, and I think he's been around since the 80s if I'm not mistaken. So yeah, very like crudely drawn characters, but it has not only just all those same vibes, a lot of that stuff carries forward. A lot of the things that we love about Attack of the Friday Monsters, the things we've been sitting here talking about, are present in that game too. And I love that it's finally like localized, easily accessible to, get on like the Nintendo Switch. I love playing it in handheld because that even, I think there's something to that too. Like I think there's something psychological about the fact that, Attack of the Friday Monsters being a handheld game. I think there's just something more intimate about playing it in handheld.
There was a really great GDC talk about modes of play, and they talked about the TV kind of being like a hearth, like a fireplace almost.
Sure.
Computer games being kind of like a workstation type of deal, like just how you're set up and everything. And then mobile games, including 3DS and phone and like Switch now, being almost like a book, and totally. I think about that a lot in like terms of designs and like how I want to approach at least like setting of play. Like I wouldn't consider like Button City's on PC, but it doesn't feel like a PC game to me, right? It feels like something that would be like on the Switch, and that's like the core system that I envisioned it on. So thinking of like Shin-Chan or Attack of the Friday Monsters, it does feel a bit more personal, up close book like to me.
Definitely.
And I just love that about these games. Like,
Me too.
I've been following Shin-Chan for a bit, and I was hoping that they would localize it as well. But like when I got it, like I didn't even ever think of like putting it up on the TV. Partially because Shandin is currently playing Elden Ring, and I'm like, cool, you need that. But it's also like
Yeah,
I
that's
don't
fair.
think I'd want to put it up on there either. So like
Yeah,
that intimacy feels very nice.
definitely. I like when the game first came out, I streamed my first play session with it, and I was like, I don't like playing the game this way. Like, I don't like playing it on a TV or on the computer monitor or whatever. Like, I just, and not that it wasn't still fun or whatever, or what I was looking for, but I was like, I don't like consuming Kaz Ayabe's content this way. I like treating it, the book comparison I think is perfect. And to your point, I also played Button City in handheld.
Oh,
Like,
nice.
I like, and Button City, by the way, is beautiful on the OLED screen. Beautiful.
Oh, thank you.
Those,
I need to get the OLED. I haven't seen it on there yet.
It's gorgeous. Because I mean, you guys did really great color work in that game, so all these bright, pastel colors and things look gorgeous on the OLED. And so like playing Shin-Chan on the OLED screen also just looks, beautiful and very striking and stuff. But yeah, these are cozy experiences. These are curl up on your couch with your favorite blanket, and play these in handheld. So if you have the opportunity to play Shin-Chan in handheld, I would recommend it that way. And then, having Attack of the Friday Monsters on something like the 3DS, I think is just another important piece of the puzzle here. Like, that there is something to that I think made it stand out. Because when I first played it, I just remember I played it on my couch, one sitting. The game's not long. The game's maybe, 5 hours long. You can very easily play it in one sitting if you wanted to. And that's what I did. Like when it first came out, I just like sat there and just consumed it all in one chunk, and just kind of fell into that world in the palm of my hand for a little bit. There's something very special and unique about that, for sure.
Yeah, I don't fully know like how to articulate like my feelings towards it, but it felt very potent in its vibes, I guess.
Sure.
Like I literally played it once, like 10 years ago. And I've been kind of espousing like how cool of a game it is since then. And even being excited for it beforehand as well. Like I was just like really excited for like just this idea of, like the setting. Sure, the gameplay, not the most like like challenging or anything like that. But I don't know, it's just like good times overall. And I feel like this is like one of those games where it'll be like within like my top speaking points when saying like, here's something in terms of like I think is good game design. And like I don't know, it's just, you don't get a lot of experiences like it, and I just highly recommend it to anybody, honestly. I'm excited to go through it again, or at least like that same kind of game design with Shin-Chan, especially with the butt wiggle on that one, so it should be fun.
Yes. Very good use of butt wiggle. Well, the game is available still. At the time this episode goes live, the eShops are still alive for now. But get on it quick. I believe it's $7.99. Again, it's inexpensive. Get on the 3DS eShop, download it, play it, and then if you want an experience that is kind of more meaty, because Shin-Chan actually is quite a bit longer than I expected. It's like a full kind of game's length. I'm seeing people say it's like 12 hours long. So,
oh wow,
so I'm like, that's kind of interesting and kind of nice. And Shin-Chan, I would say, is even more gameplay heavy than Attack of the Friday Monsters, but I would say, go on the eShop. Give this one a whirl. If you like what it's putting down, and you want more stuff that taps into these vibes, these very particular, very specific vibes. Again, not a lot of games like this. You can then jump on your Switch, get something like Button City, get something like Shin-Chan, and kind of, keep that rolling. Because I have found myself, ever since playing this game, I found myself like wanting to play things like this. Like I miss it. I get nostalgic for the nostalgia of this game,
Definitely. I feel that.
Yeah, well, again, definitely recommend you guys check out Button City. Available, I think Nintendo Switch is the way to go with that one. Like, definitely play it on Switch. I love playing it there. Shin-Chan available on Switch. Attack of the Friday Monsters on the 3DS eShop. Ryan, how can folks follow you and follow Subliminal and whatever you guys are up to?
So you can follow me personally on Twitter at Subliminal Man. You can find out more about Button City and get a bunch of really cool things, including obviously the game. We have some cool merch. We have some freebies, including a printout paper fennel that you could make,
Nice.
and a free art book on our website, buttoncitygame.com. And then we have our studio website, subliminalgaming.com, where you can find out more about our future titles. And yeah, I think those are like the major things.
Sweet. Awesome. Well, you guys will find links to all of that in the episode description if you're listening to the audio version, and in the video description if you're watching on YouTube. Ryan, thank you so much. This is such a treat. Thank you so much again for your time and for coming on to talk about this special little game.
Definitely. And thank you for having me. It was such a good time playing through it again. It was great talking to you about it, sharing such an amazing game with people. It's so great. So great. Thank you for this opportunity.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. Go play Attack of the Friday Monsters. Go follow Ryan on Twitter. Go play Button City. Go play Shin-Chan. Create what you want to create. And thank you for helping me keep Nintendo weird. Bye.